Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, January 13th, 2025, and today we are talking what I do in each of the next few months to gear up on the farm. We'll talk about a few things to fortify the farm business and the potential of a single tray of seedlings. So yeah, let's do it. Okay, so I hope you all had a nice weekend. For me, this weekend was a relatively laid-back one to some extent. I got some reading done. I watched a lot of soccer with my family. Cheers to my Seagulls, who won their FA Cup game, and then had a terrible draw to play Chelsea next month, so that's fun. Anyway, I also watched some college basketball, go Cats, but also after a week physically sealed out of doing much of any real farm work, I was feeling a bit stir-crazy, to just be perfectly honest. So although I don't normally work on Sundays, I decided to go ahead and get a few thousand onion and lettuce plants going because I'm just frankly itching to get things going and I just can't sit in the house anymore. I've been making soil blocks for some 16 years now and I still love it, though now we are using the Swift Blocker 200 block soil blocker instead of the standing blocker that I used for a long time, and even for some time we used just the hand blockers, which was intense. And we do soil blocks for most things. However, soil blocking is not what I'm going to talk about today. Add that to the list for something else to talk about this week because it's about that time. I love soil blocking and have done it for a while now, but that doesn't mean I think it's for everyone. So it's worth talking about. But again, let's tackle that one later. For me, for now, what I was thinking about when I was dropping the seeds into each of the blocks was potential. When you look at that small 15 tray selection of soil blocks that you can see if you're watching this on YouTube, or just, I guess you can imagine it if you're not, it takes up a relatively small amount of space, but equals about 3,000 soil blocks. Now, if I can make an average of $1.50 per block, which isn't unreasonable considering I started things like lettuces, which at $3 or $4 a piece, a head, brings up the price of the onions, which may be closer to like $1 per block. But anyway, if I can average $1.50 per block, that's $4,500 in potential gross revenue sitting in front of me, or $300 per tray. So my goal is always to try to get that number to fruition as best that I can. To be sure, that won't happen perfectly. I mean, some years it will, some years it won't, some trays it will, some trays it won't. But everyone has to find their motivational tricks. And for me, knowing that I have a potential $300 sitting there in my greenhouse in every tray I make, waiting to be nurtured into existence, helps a lot as a business owner. It motivates me to keep my costs and labor down, though I do pay my kids in Legos to help seed sometimes, which really eats into the profitability. But oh well, it's fun to work beside them without forcing them to do the work. So it's worth it. But that's also a topic for another day. Even once a crop hits the field, let's say that each bed requires 2.25 trays, depending on the crop and the space. But anyway, that's too many numbers. Not trying to do that to you. But that makes that bed worth like $750 worth of product growing away in it that has to be cared for. And it may make more or less money than that $750. It depends on the crop and the market. But I find it's helpful to know that, like, when I look at that bed, that is a mortgage payment I'm growing right there in that lettuce bed or whatever it is. So I better do everything I can to protect it. I find having a lot of little motivational tricks, some financial like that, or some ecological, like looking for a new bird or bug species to catalog every year. That's important for me to stay motivated, to stay self-motivated, because you're often doing this stuff on your own, to stay focused when running a farm business, because this can be a motivationally challenging pursuit, because a lot of it is like, get up and go do the work. And sometimes you just need things to motivate you, as many as you can. In this season, because we are pulling back a bit, I'm hoping for every bed to make about $450 to cover expenses. Remember, that's like I charge my bed's rent, so to speak, for each crop, which covers all of our farm expenses. And that means that anything over my $450 is profit. So my incentive to make each tray succeed is pretty high. And I'm less likely to get lazy with trays and plants when I imagine they're worth $300 or more, certainly more for other crops, every time I start one. Anyway, the whole idea there is that each tray you start has a financial value, like a potential income, and thinking about that potential income helps me to keep them alive and keep them healthy and happy and get them into the ground and keep them healthy all the way until I harvest them and eat them and sell them. So yeah, anyway, what are your self-motivating tricks for keeping yourself productive on the farm and making sure that stuff succeeds? Let me know in the comment section. We'll take a quick break and then run you through the next few months on the farm. Yeah, BRB.
So you're in a hurry? Well, you better calm down. We're all friends around you, just join the fun. 'Cause if you're in a hurry, you're missing the point. Should enjoy the fruits of life instead of chasing coins.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Peaceful Heritage Nursery. If you're looking for hardy and resilient fruit trees, berry plants, or pawpaw trees, then check out Peaceful Heritage Nursery. Peaceful Heritage Nursery LLC is a mail-order nursery shipping premium quality fruit trees and berry plants across the USA. They specialize in resilient, non-GMO plant genetics for small growers. Their diverse selection includes berries, cold hardy figs, passion fruit, gumi, mulberry, and much more. They're famous for their diverse selection of premium quality grafted pawpaw trees. 5-star Google ratings and customer testimonials attest to their commitment to excellence in quality and service. Find them at peacefulheritage.com and join their mailing list. Once again, find them at peacefulheritage.com. Use the promo code NOTILL, all caps, one word, for 10% off your first order. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/notillgrowers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Alex Skade, who writes, quote, would be interested in how you are spending the next few months on the farm. Major projects, bucket lists, or other chores, end quote. Awesome and fun question, Alex. Thank you. Now, Alex asked this back in December, but let's just break this down starting right now, what the next few months look like for me and just in general on a small vegetable farm in Kentucky. All right, January. January is the month where we start to touch base again with our restaurant accounts and check in about what they need. What went right, what went wrong last year. I noticed one account did not have regular access to basil this past year. I want to see if we can be that supplier, so I will start dialing that in January. I will also sow carrots in the tunnel and start my onions and some lettuce, obviously. All of those things I did last week, but around the middle of the month is typical. At the end of the month, I will start my peppers. This month, January, is one of my last chances to get some of the important winter projects done, like fixing our deck. Luckily, it has like 1,000 pounds of ice and snow on it right now, so that's going swimmingly. Also, this is notably sign-up season for spring sports, and because I help on our local soccer board, I'm doing some organizing and gearing up for the spring soccer season. With that in mind, go sign up now if you want your kid to do some spring sports this year. Most rec leagues have to stop their spring signups well before the spring season because uniforms have to be ordered. So don't say I didn't warn you. If you want to get in on it, I'd get in on it now. Oh, and shout out to the Oak Conference in a couple weeks. Not doing much conferencing this year like I normally would, from the months of January, February, March. But I'll be stopping into Oak for sure. Always a good time there. Love seeing my friends. I've been going to that conference for probably 14 years-ish. Long time. Now, February. February is the month where the sunlight is starting to noticeably return, and although winter is still very much here, spring starts to nip a little bit. We usually see daffodils popping and get a few really nice days betwixt the cold ones, the many, many cold ones. In the tunnel, I sow radishes, arugula, lettuce, and spinach. I start my tomatoes. I actually may sow some lettuce, arugula, and spinach next week, but I almost always do it right at the beginning of February. I start my tomatoes and celery and field lettuce and lettuce heads, among a few other crops potentially, because I can't always help myself. This is truly the last gasp on winter projects too. I really need to tune up the BCS, our walk-behind tractor, this winter. So if I don't get that done in January, it moves to the top of the February list. I also want to get our potatoes in trays and sprouting in February if possible. Again, I'm experimenting a lot with growing potatoes from shoots this year and seeing if I can find a combo or process that renders large enough potatoes from the shoots, because that would just make so many things easier. We'll definitely keep you updated on how that whole thing goes, probably on a near week by week basis, because I have a show that I can do that on literally every day. March is when the first field crops go in. I sow carrots around the 15th every year. I transplant lettuce and sow spinach around that same time. I will success the radishes a bit and possibly the arugula. Just depends on where things are. And basically just once those crops start to get close to maturity, I sow another round. You may notice that there are a lot of crops I'm not mentioning because our list is very simple this year. Like typically, I would also be starting things like fennel, green onions, beets, and several more crops around this time, but I don't really need them this year. I will sow some beets, but not on a large scale because it's a bigger farmer's market item for us than it is like a retail item. So we're not doing the farmer's market. So I don't really need to focus too much on those crops. In March, I will also do my tomato and cucumber grafting and plant 1 million trees that I ordered as well that are supposedly coming in the beginning of that month. March is also just the, for real though, very last chance I will get to do anything that is not really gardening my face off for the next few months and taking care of this show. Also, the spring soccer season starts in March, so I will be coaching basically every evening from March until May, with games starting in April. It's chaos and it's wonderful and I can't wait. Anyway, I hope that was a fun little jaunt through my future, everyone. Thanks for the question, Alex, and Patreon members. Don't hesitate to get your questions in. I will get to them, maybe a few weeks late, but I will try. Next, we will take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about how farming is already futuristic, in arguably the loosest sense of the word. Yeah, be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnwah Greenhouses. Harnwah Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Harnwah Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Harnwah is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Harnwah Greenhouses, leading the way in turnkey solutions for local growers. Learn more at harnwah.com. That's HARNOIS.com. All right, back to the show. Mid-January is usually a busy time for me, even when I'm not doing a winter garden, as was the case this season. My chiropractor and I were talking about all the snow and ice on Friday, and I was like, I kind of need it to go away so I can get my gardens going, and she left before realizing, oh, he's serious. Sure, I'm not doing any soil work or planting at this point, but I'm really going to and from the tunnels a lot and starting seeds in the greenhouse, having to dig the soil mix out from a layer of snow. So the snow and ice is not the most, it's not directly in my way, but it is not the most convenient for me. But the funny thing about farming, much more than any other jobs I've ever had, such as working in kitchens and wine shops, is how much you have to live in the future. Indeed, you always have to be working a full season or two ahead. So January is not really January for me. January is like March, April, May, June in my brain. What I mean is that like when I'm starting my peppers next week, in January still, and then when I'm planting them in May in the field this year, I'm not doing them in the tunnel, I'm really thinking about July and August when the harvest gets going, not May and January. When I planted garlic in October, I was thinking about the summer next year. Lettuce, by comparison, seems so much simpler because I'm only having to live 2 months in the future. But for most things, that's still quite a long time. However, for me, this was not originally an easy thing to do, to change my brain to thinking that far ahead. When I started farming, so accepting of change am I that I just assume the entire world will be different every 6 months. And in the case of things like COVID, sometimes it is, but I've learned that there are a few things you can do to fortify a farm business against big and small changes alike. First, if you want to know the future, study the past, as they say. And I'm a history fan, but in farming, this can be very literal in the sense that if you know how much garlic you sold every week throughout the season, for instance, and got a sense of how much more you could have sold, or conversely, how much you wasted, then you can know in October what should be growing. Previous year's numbers are always something that should inform next year's production. Second, it's important to stay somewhat diversified, both in crops and markets, so that a pivot in one direction or another is possible if need be. COVID was certainly a whirlwind for farmers who suddenly found a lot of interest in their local food, but had to be in a place to sell it. Some growers who sold strictly to restaurants had to find new markets, like starting a CSA. We had to restart our CSA all of a sudden, not knowing if the farmers market would happen that year or in what capacity. Luckily, we had connections and contacts from doing CSA farming for years, but also had spent time developing a social media presence and email list. Those things, in particular social media, may seem silly in the moment, but certainly they came in handy that year. Third, what I call hopeful planting isn't fair to your future self. Say it again. Hopeful planting, i.e. just throwing stuff in the ground hoping it will work out later, isn't kind to yourself when you have to deal with it later on. There's always going to be this tension between past me and future me, where past me can get a little too ambitious, like, okay, well, I'll plant an extra round of tomatoes this season, and then future me can just figure out what to do with them. Forgetting or ignoring that future me will be very busy and very tired and will not likely have the time or capacity to find someone to buy all these tomatoes. Or past me can be a little too lazy, perhaps. Perhaps planting something in a wonky spacing, or not cultivating well, or not picking up some irrigation line that is now deeply buried in grass, or simply not planting enough for what I'll absolutely need for some restaurant order. Of course, sometimes past me just wanted to watch a midweek, midday Premier League match with his boy instead of planting that extra bed of lettuce or whatever. So it's important to be sympathetic to yourself too. Don't be too hard on yourself, in other words. But that lesson is effectively take care of the people around you, but also take care of your future self or selves. I think of it like being in a relationship. If both parties are always going out of their way to help the other person and empathize with them, then you can have a happy, healthy life together. And to be sure, you will be with yourself for a while. So it's worth it. Anywho, that's where my brain is at on this lovely winter Monday. Let's call it a show for now. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers for their support. Pick up a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com, or The Seed Farmer by Dan Breezeball at notillgrowers.com to support our work. And of course, Dan's. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you just sign up in the month of January, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Lindy Morgan. Ooh, Lindy's a fun name. Lindy Morgan, Tiny Llama. Tiny, also a good name. I like these names ending in Y's. And Lauren Endicott. That's a fun name too. This one is a story that follows the comedic misadventures of a group of ecologists who are in search of the 144 bird species on the American Bird Conservancy's 10 most wanted list. I don't know why they call it a 10. I think they call it a 10 most wanted, but I think there's 144 of them. But that is an actual list, and I would totally watch that show. So I look forward to it. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening to this show. We will see you tomorrow for Tuesday. Yeah, I think it's Tuesday. Should be. Usually is. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.